let's talk about the story of the night, okay? So if you listen to Wednesday's Aaron Torres pod, one thing that I did talk about, I talked a lot about the idea that I believe that this is the year in college basketball that NIL and the portal has completely flattened the playing field. On Tuesday night, Tennessee and North Carolina, two top 10 teams fall. And on Wednesday, it was very much the same as number 10 Kentucky loses at home to Florida in overtime. 94-91 is the final score there, okay? So I want to dive into this game, couple thoughts, but listen, we got a large Kentucky crowd, huge fan base, whatever. It is only right that we do start with the winning team. And let's go ahead and give a little bit of credit to the Florida Gators for coming out and getting this win, okay? So if you follow me on Twitter at Aaron_Torres, on Saturday afternoon, Florida in overtime beat Georgia. And I put out a tweet basically saying, like, Florida, to me, talent-wise, is one of the top 25 teams in college basketball in terms of pure talent. They have four really good guards: Zion Pullum, Walter Clayton, Riley Kugel, and Will Richard. Their big guys are really good. And I said, look, they're on the bubble. I'm not a Lenardi. I don't do bracketology. But I basically said, if this team does not make the NCAA tournament, and there's obviously no major injuries or anything, like that's a failure by the coaching staff. Well, 3 nights later, they go to Rupp Arena and get the win. And listen, everything that I told you this team was capable of, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, I have all the answers, but what did I tell you about this team? 4 really good guards. They create all sorts of pressure on offense. And this is a really good team. But the one thing they were weirdly lacking was big wins in the moment. And they got one on Wednesday night at Rupp Arena. Obviously, the story of the game, the Walter Clayton kid is incredible, okay? And it's funny because he was a transfer from Iona, okay? So he was a player who played last year for Rick Pitino at St. John's, or at Iona, excuse me. And there was a belief that he was going to follow Rick Pitino to St. John's. I bring it up because I was talking to our Torres on St. John's guy, and I said, this is kind of the exact player that St. John's is missing. And if they had him, I was like, I think St. John's is probably a top 10 team right now. Bring it up because this guy just threw dagger after dagger after dagger in this game. He hit a 3 to tie the game and send it to overtime, and really hit the 3 that sealed the victory. 7 threes overall for this kid, 23 points overall for Walter Clayton. So Florida gets the win. And listen, again, I don't do bracketology. That's not my area of expertise. But this is a team that should be on the right side of the bubble come the next Joe Lenardi bracketology update. And this was a game that they needed to win. And by the way, another thing we talked about on Wednesday's Aaron Torres pod was the idea that I thought the SEC was trending towards maybe 9 teams, if you include both Mississippi schools, Kentucky, Tennessee, whoever. But Florida was one right on the cusp. They get the win. So credit to them. We got to start with them. But obviously the real story to me is Kentucky. And listen, I keep trying to defend this team. I keep saying everything's going to be okay. I keep saying the upside is through the roof. And then you have nights like this where you can't help but be disappointed. Now, I know what a lot of people will say, and I think it's completely fair, by the way. To be clear, I think it is fair. Kentucky was down 2 starters. Now, you could argue Justin Edwards maybe hasn't been the most productive player for Kentucky this year. I get that. But at the same time, you're down DJ Wagner, who I talked about following the game on Saturday at Arkansas, who I really like. You're down Justin Edwards. And obviously, look, you had a chance in regulation to win that game. So I'm not here to sit here and say the sky is falling. And it is worth noting, it is absolutely worth noting that right now in this moment, Kentucky was down 2 guys. But I also have to call a spade and say, that is a bad loss, even against a team like Florida, who I believe is an NCAA tournament team. You're at home. I know you're down 2 starters, but that is a win that you have to get at home. And I think that's the frustrating thing for Kentucky, right? Again, I keep talking about it. I keep hammering it home. In college basketball in 2024, it is so hard to win on the road. So when you have teams on the ropes, when you have teams and you have the opportunity to put them away and you do not do it, that is a bad situation because you know how tough it is on the road. Kentucky already has 2 road losses this year at Texas A&M and at, of course, last week, South Carolina. And so you have to win these games at home, and you have to win games that you're largely in control of. That's the thing more than anything that stands out to me is watching that game. It was like a 2-point game, a 5-point game, a 2-point game, a 3-point game, a 6-point game, but it never felt like Kentucky was not in control until all of a sudden it was in overtime and you trail. Now, if you're looking for some positives from the Kentucky perspective, I guess what probably stands out to me is a couple things. Is one from the Kentucky perspective. Listen, Agani Nyenso was unbelievable. Okay. And so I'll be honest, I was doing some prep work on Wednesday before this game, and I don't think I realized how good he has been for this team. Did you know that Agani Nyenso, in theory, is in the top 10 nationally in block shots? Only he doesn't show up on the stat sheet because he hasn't played enough minutes to register for the NCAA statistics, averaging 2.5 blocks per game. Purdue, by the way, or Zach Edey for Purdue, who plays 28, 29, 30 minutes a game, is basically averaging the same. Onyenso is averaging 2.5 blocks per game in 14 minutes of play. Well, on Wednesday night, he played a lot because Kentucky needed him to. Finishes with just an insane stat line, 13 points, 16 rebounds, 8 blocks. Listen, Kentucky fans, if I told you were going to get 13, 16, and 8 from Ugo, oh, you would have just chalked up the victory. You wouldn't have even thought twice about it. So from the Kentucky perspective, if you are looking for a positive, this kid was unbelievable. Reed Sheppard and Antonio Reeves were as good as they always are. Antonio Reeves finishing the game with 19 points. Reed Sheppard with 24 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. Rob Dillingham with 20 points off the bench. If you're looking for another positive, Rob Dillingham banged knees late in the game. You worry about what his injury status is. He comes back in by the end, so that's a positive. But I do think if there is one thing for me to take away, I believe we are now 20 games into the season for Kentucky. And if I'm not mistaken, they have not had their full roster in any game this entire season, which is really bad. And I think tonight, Wednesday night, proved that, look, I don't care how good you are. I don't care how much scoring you have. You can never have too many dudes that can put the ball in the basket. And just being down a guard, having to play some of these lineups that they did, I don't think that it helped. So from the Kentucky perspective, listen, you got to bounce back and bounce back quick. You got Tennessee coming into town on Saturday. Remember, by the way, Tennessee is coming off of a loss. So you talk about a must-win game for both teams. Neither team wants to drop a second straight game. Kentucky, if you lose this game, it would be 3-4. You got to get right. You got to get this win. And to answer the text that I just got, I won't call out the name of the person who dropped this text, but man, oh man, oh man. You got to start picking up big wins, man. It was great you beat Carolina on a neutral court. It was great that you beat Florida in a true road game, but at some point you have to win games that matter on the, at home when you have the opportunity to pick up big wins. So Kentucky, you're frustrated. I get it. You should be. I don't know what else there is to say. I'm frustrated for you guys as Kentucky fans because I felt like the win was there to be had. Don't want to take away anything from Florida, but you needed to get the win there.